Well, summer is in full swing with states across the country crushing heat records on a near daily basis. Perhaps no sound is more welcome to someone caught in 100-degree temperatures than this. But while you slurp down that $1 soda, big banks are profiting in a major way. Get ready for this number and try not to spit out the contents of that can everywhere. Goldman Sachs has collected $5 billion over the past 3 years for simply storing the aluminum cans used, to make these cans and other products. Why is this such a big deal? Well, a New York Times investigation has discovered that Goldman Sachs is creating an artificial shortage of aluminum by buying warehouses that store the commodity and then delaying the shipping process up to 16 months. Here to tell me how is the host of Prime Interest, Bob English. Bob, thank you so much for joining me. First of all,
to be here. Thank you.
I think you need one of your own.
Do you mind if I pop this open?
I do not mind at all. Now, can you tell me a little bit more about how Goldman Sachs has been able to manipulate the aluminum prices?
Well, first, I'm glad the old gray lady is covering this story, but it's been around for years. And here's how it basically works. We have futures markets, and some of those are based in London, some of those are based in Chicago, where you can bet on the price, the future price of a commodity. In the case of aluminum, the biggest market is in London, so that's why we're talking about the London Metal Exchange here. Goldman Sachs has decided to become a big player, and they actually take physical delivery and supply of this aluminum. So they've created 27 warehouses in Detroit whereby they can just shuffle this aluminum around. Now, here's where it gets really shifty, is that by these exchange laws, the London Metal Association, they have to ship a certain amount out every day. 3,000 tons. Okay, instead of doing that, because there isn't the demand for that, they just move it around their warehouse, literally on forklifts, and then they charge a storage fee on top of that. So that's how they're making their $5 billion.
And it seems like it's only a tenth of a cent of a penny on every Coke can, but yet,
it doesn't seem like that
soda
much.
Can, but
yeah, it's almost like high-frequency trading, and I hope I don't get too off board here, but in stocks trading, you know, you have computers that are just shaving off 1/10 of a penny at a time from stock prices that you and I, you know, in our 401ks might take, and it adds up over time. It's like Superman 2, that money laundering scheme they had.
So how long has this been going on for? And is it really that unique to aluminum or even to Goldman Sachs?
No, Goldman Sachs was an early player in the commodity field, and this happened through a company they acquired called J. Aron, and they got special exemptions from the government, from the futures regulators in the U.S. to avoid speculation laws. In other words, they were not bona fide hedgers, they were speculators, and they got exemptions that said they could just control as much as they wanted. And Goldman was an early player. They didn't actually become a bank until we had the financial panic of 2008. So magically, overnight, they're a bank now, and they have access to all this free Federal Reserve money, and they become an even bigger player. And that's when J.P. Morgan really started getting big into the commodities market too. And they did it in crude. At one point during the financial panic, crude had gone from $145 per barrel all the way down to $30 per barrel. So J.P. Morgan bought up a bunch of ships, dumped them all this crude oil, and they just set it in the ocean and waited for the price to rise.
Very interesting. So it's obviously not unique to aluminum or to Goldman Sachs. But another player that is involved in this is the London Metal Exchange.
Sure, we talked about that a little bit.
It's so interesting because they are regulating the Detroit industry where this is happening. And as I understand it, they also they get part of the pie when it comes to the money. Can you explain this a little more detail and why they are the ones regulating it?
Well, first, there's a distinction to be made between London and the City of London. The City of London is a square-mile block where all the big financial deals are done in London, and that's where the LME resides, and it's actually not even owned in the City of London anymore. It was sold off to a group in Hong Kong. So we have the usual players on the board of directors from J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs. But to answer your question, the London Metal Exchange gets about 1% of the storage costs, and that's how they're profiting in this Goldman Sachs game. So if Goldman Sachs is making money, London Metal Exchange is making money, and so is Hong Kong.
And technically, none of this is illegal, right? Even if it is considered stacking the cards in your favor, or some would call it overreaching.
No, it's technically legal, but it gets down to a concept called regulatory arbitrage. We have rules and regulations in the U.S., and a lot of those rules and regulations do not exist in London or the City of London or even Hong Kong, so there's an arbitrage game to be played, and definitely Goldman Sachs is playing that out right now.
So it is a conflict of interest, is what you are arguing.
I think it's a conflict of interest because I have no problem with speculators per se. It's when these speculators are financed by the